I still remember the way my hands shook that afternoon. I was standing by the daycare sign-out sheet, my pen hovering mid-signature, when my phone vibrated with a message that would split my life cleanly into before and after. Moving to Spain with Jackie. I've transferred our savings to my private account. Good luck paying rent. At first, I thought it was some cruel joke, a mistyped message, a glitch, a hallucination, but the letters stayed where they were, sharp and indifferent on the screen. While my son Leo tugged at my sleeve, asking if I'd remembered his dinosaur snacks. He was 4, innocent, full of chatter about toy trains and bedtime stories, completely unaware that his father had just vanished across an ocean with another woman. I smiled for him, forced my hand to move again, finished the signature that suddenly felt like a signature on the death certificate of our life together. When I said my name, Suzanne Mitchell, 37, editor, wife, mother. I used to believe those words meant stability. I had built my identity around the quiet rhythm of family life, editing manuscripts from home, cooking spaghetti on Tuesdays, folding tiny socks that always came out of the dryer inside out. I thought I'd built something solid. But betrayal is a slow earthquake. It starts beneath you, long before you feel it, until one day the floor just isn't there anymore. On the drive home, Leo sang along to a cartoon jingle, his voice sweet and oblivious. I kept nodding at traffic lights that I barely saw, thinking only of numbers, our rent due in 3 days. The savings I'd worked for 8 years to build, now gone with a single transfer click. $42,731. I repeated it in my head until the figure blurred into static. At home, I gave Leo his favorite pizza rolls and sat on the couch with my phone pressed to my ear, calling the bank, my voice shaking as I tried to sound calm. The representative's tone was polite, almost apologetic, as she confirmed what I already knew deep down. Yes, ma'am. The funds were transferred to an individual account in your husband's name. I'm afraid, since both names were on the original account, it's considered authorized access. Authorized. What a tidy word for a theft that gutted a family. The checking balance was $347.12. I stared at that number as if my life depended on it. In a way, it did. That night, I tucked Leo into bed and told him Daddy was on a trip, the first of many half-truths I would tell to protect him. He nodded sleepily, trusting me completely. It broke something inside me to realize I no longer trusted anyone, not even myself, for missing the signs. My phone buzzed again just as I was about to collapse on the couch. It was David's mother, Beatrice, her voice sharp, judgment already loaded into every syllable. "What have you done?" Suzanne, she demanded. "David says you're threatening to keep Leo from him unless he pays you more alimony." I laughed, a broken, disbelieving sound. "Beatrice, he moved to Spain. He emptied our accounts. I just found out today." "Don't lie to me," she snapped. "He showed me your messages. I raised a better son than that. You won't bully him into paying you." She hung up before I could respond. I sat staring at the wall, realizing with slow, cold clarity that David wasn't just leaving, he was rewriting the story, turning me into the villain before I even had a chance to speak. That night I lay awake, watching the shadows crawl across the ceiling, hearing Leo's soft breathing from the next room. Every emotion came in waves: disbelief, rage, sorrow, until, finally, a quieter one rose above them all: resolve. David had underestimated me for the last time. I met him 9 years earlier, at a publishing conference in New York. I was young, ambitious, and fiercely independent. He was charming, the kind of man who remembered your coffee order after one date, who sent handwritten notes instead of texts, who looked at you like you were the only person in a crowded room. He made promises about forever, and I believed him because I wanted to. The early years were good, or maybe I've edited the memories to make them that way. We laughed a lot. We traveled. When Leo was born, I gave up full-time work so I could be home with him. I told myself it was temporary, that I'd return once he started preschool. David encouraged the idea, said he wanted me to enjoy motherhood. He said he'd take care of everything. And he did, until taking care of everything slowly became control over everything. First, he suggested selling our condo to invest in a friend's startup, when it failed. He said we were unlucky, when I asked to go back to work. He said Leo needed stability, and when he started coming home late, smelling of expensive perfume I didn't wear, he said I was being paranoid. He was careful, though always just plausible enough to quiet my doubts. That's the cruelty of deceit. It's not in the lie itself, but in the way it teaches you to doubt your own instincts. The night before the text, I found a travel guide to Barcelona hidden in his desk. He brushed it off, said it was research for a potential expansion. I laughed with him, because I wanted so badly to believe we were still on the same side. The next morning, he left for work like every other day. He kissed Leo's forehead. He smiled at me. That was the last time I saw him. When I finally gathered the courage to visit his office 2 days later, the receptionist looked at me like she was seeing a ghost. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Mitchell," she said gently. "David resigned last week. Yesterday was his last day." The words blurred. Last week, while I was making grocery lists and folding laundry, he was planning his exit. In the parking garage, I called his best friend, Trevor. He hesitated before answering, his voice heavy with guilt. "He made me promise not to tell you," Trevor said quietly. "He said he needed a clean break." "A clean break from his wife and child?" I asked. Trevor sighed. "Jackie makes him happy. Suzanne. He said you'd be better off without him dragging you down." That phrase, "dragging you down," lodged in my chest like a shard of glass. I wanted to scream, to ask how a man could walk away from his child and still think himself noble. But I didn't. I hung up, drove home, and found a certified letter waiting on my doorstep. Inside was a petition for divorce, filed a week earlier. Citing irreconcilable differences, his new address Barcelona, no custody request, no visitation rights, no child support. Attached was a note from his lawyer. "Mr. Mitchell has indicated you have substantial savings to support yourself during this transition." Substantial savings, he'd taken them all. I sat there among the papers, the legal language, the false civility, the neatly typed signatures, and realized that the man I had loved was not just gone, he had never truly existed. My phone buzzed again. "Landed in Barcelona. Don't contact me. My lawyer will handle everything." That was the moment something inside me changed. Not broken-hearted, focused. I spent that night drafting a plan on a yellow legal pad. Secure housing before the rent deadline. Document every transaction, every message, every lie. Find a lawyer who could fight this. When Leo woke up asking for pancakes, I smiled and said, "Of course, because that's what mothers do, they build stability out of rubble." 3 days later, I sat across from a divorce attorney named Vivian Aguilar Sharp. Calm, unshakable. She studied the papers, her brow furrowing. "What your husband did is despicable," she said finally. "But not entirely illegal. He had joint access. But the courts will not look kindly on this behavior. We can file emergency motions, child support, asset freeze, maybe even jurisdiction recall if he's working abroad." It wasn't victory, but it was a beginning. That night, after putting Leo to bed, I went through David's old desk again, amid tax folders and warranties. I found a sealed envelope addressed to his mother. Inside was a card, "Mom. Thank you for helping with the Barcelona apartment deposit. Jackie and I can't wait to show you our new place when you visit in May." 3 months ago. My hands trembled. Beatrice hadn't just known she had funded it. I took photos of everything. Every card, every date, every scrap of proof. Then I opened our shared computer. In his drafts folder sat an unsent email to Jackie, with a resume attached his new job at a Barcelona firm starting 2 days after he left. The betrayal was complete, personal, financial, emotional, generational. But as I stared at that screen, I realized something else. Every cruel thing he had done was now documented. Every secret trail he'd left behind could be turned into evidence. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to power. Vivian didn't waste time. By the next morning, she had filed emergency motions requests for child support, orders to freeze assets, and documentation to prove David's abandonment. Watching her in action was like witnessing controlled fire, steady, precise, and unstoppable. For the first time since that text, I wasn't just reacting, I was fighting back. While she handled the paperwork, I focused on survival. My parents drove in from Michigan with groceries and cash envelopes tucked inside my mother's purse, pretending it wasn't charity. "You shouldn't be alone," she said, touching my hand gently. I nodded, too proud to cry in front of them. But that night, when the house was quiet, I sat on the floor and let myself fall apart for exactly 10 minutes, sobbing until the walls blurred before standing up again. 10 minutes was all I could afford. Leo's laughter became my anchor. When he asked if Daddy would call soon, I smiled and said maybe. When he asked if Daddy was coming home, I told him we were figuring it out. The lies were tiny shields protecting him from truths he was too young to carry. But underneath that calm exterior, my anger began to grow roots. It wasn't the wild, flaring kind of rage that burns and fades. It was quieter, colder, the kind that waits. Then came the message from David's lawyer, a settlement offer. $5,000 in exchange for dropping all claims. I stared at the email in disbelief before forwarding it to Vivian. Her response came almost immediately. "They're testing your desperation. Don't engage." Desperation. That was exactly what David was counting on, that I'd be too tired, too overwhelmed, too scared to keep fighting. That night, another message came, this one directly from him. "Take the settlement. Suzanne, you won't get more. Fighting will just drain what little I've offered. Be reasonable for once." Reasonable. The word twisted inside me like a knife. I saved the message as evidence, but I also memorized it. It became a kind of mantra, not for surrender, but for revenge. 2 days later, Vivian called. "We have a hearing date," she said, "but we need more. We need proof that he's earning money overseas, anything to show he's working and hiding income." Proof, evidence, facts. It was all so cold, so procedural. But for me, it had become deeply personal. That night, after Leo was asleep, I went through David's desk again, this time with purpose. Beneath a pile of receipts and old pay stubs, I found the card I'd photographed before. Beatrice's handwriting leapt off the paper. "Happy birthday. Sweetheart, I'm proud of you for taking control of your life. Spain will be good for you and Jackie." Taking control. She had known everything. She had even celebrated it. My hands shook as I flipped the card over. The date was from 3 months earlier, long before David's so-called promotion. I felt nauseous. It wasn't just betrayal from a husband anymore. It was collusion between mother and son. Vivian's face hardened when she saw it the next morning. "We can subpoena her," she said. "If she helped him move money or plan this, she's legally implicated." It should have made me feel vindicated, but instead, I felt hollow. Because beneath every legal term was a truth I didn't want to face. This wasn't a family anymore. It was a war. Later that week, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. "Suzanne," a hesitant voice said. "This is Bethany, Jackie's old roommate. I think you should know what they've been planning." Bethany told me everything. How Jackie had been bragging for months about starting over in Spain. How David had set up accounts overseas so I couldn't touch a cent. How they'd laughed about making it so expensive and difficult that I'd eventually give up. When she hung up, I sat there in stunned silence. There was no hesitation in Bethany's voice, no exaggeration, just facts. I sent Vivian everything, screenshots, call logs, the works. "This changes things," she said. "It proves premeditation. It's not abandonment, it's fraud." I was beginning to learn the language of survival evidence, filing, hearings, jurisdiction. But I also learned something else: betrayal has layers. Each new revelation peeled another one back. The morning of the emergency hearing, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was David. "I hear you're dragging Mom into this. Bad move. Suzanne, drop this now or you'll regret it." I stared at the message, my pulse steady. Regret, no. I'd lived with regret for years, every time I ignored my instincts. Every time I let him talk me out of my doubts, I wasn't afraid anymore. In the courthouse hallway, I stood beside Vivian as she organized her files with calm precision. I could hear laughter from down the hall, David's lawyer, a tall, smug man named Hoffman. And then I saw her. Beatrice, dressed in pearls and judgment, her expression polished to that familiar mask of superiority. She approached me like a queen addressing a criminal. "You should be ashamed," she hissed quietly. "Trying to extort my son when you're the one who drove him away." Vivian touched my arm before I could respond. "Mrs. Mitchell," she said coolly, "since you're here, I'll be calling you as a witness. You can explain your financial support for your son's relocation to the court." Beatrice paled slightly, the first crack in her composure. Inside the courtroom, the judge listened carefully as Vivian laid out the evidence, the emptied accounts, the resignation letter, the proof of David's employment in Spain. David's lawyer tried to argue mutual financial disagreement, but the judge wasn't fooled. "I'm granting temporary child support," he said, his tone clipped, "and freezing all accessible marital assets until the matter is settled." For the first time in weeks, I exhaled. It wasn't everything, but it was something. After the hearing, I caught Beatrice watching me, her face unreadable. I couldn't tell if it was hatred or fear, but I knew she wasn't finished. The next morning proved me right. A woman with a soft Spanish accent called, introducing herself as the HR director from Meridian Global Barcelona, the very company where David had supposedly started working. "I'm calling to inform you," she said, "that Mr. Mitchell has been terminated." I frowned. "Terminated why?" "Because of the email you sent us," she said gently. "The one about his legal troubles in the United States." "I didn't send any email," I whispered. There was silence on the other end. "Someone using your name did." When she forwarded the email, I opened it with shaking hands. My name, my tone, my email address, but the words weren't mine. They were vicious. Accusing David of fraud, threatening lawsuits against his employer, and attached copies of documents only I should have had. Documents I'd shown Beatrice when she came to check on me. I sank to the floor as realization washed over me. She had done it. She had impersonated me to get him fired, to make it look like I'd sabotaged his career so he could claim financial hardship in court. Vivian confirmed my fears. "This is identity fraud," she said grimly. "She's trying to invalidate the support order. We'll need to report it immediately." That night, as I gathered the papers to prepare a police report, my phone rang again. "David." "You vindictive," he began, his voice shaking with rage. "You got me fired after everything I offered you." "It wasn't me, David," I said quietly. "It was your mother." There was silence, then a disbelieving laugh. "That's absurd. She'd never—" "Check the documents," I said. "Those files were in my apartment. She was the only one who had access." For a moment, nothing, then a low, uncertain voice. "I'll call you back." When he did, the message came in an email, a series of screenshots, texts between him and his mother. "Once you're settled in Spain," she had written, "we'll work on getting full custody of Leo. With Suzanne's history of depression, the court will see she's unstable. My postpartum depression, something I had fought through years ago, something David had once comforted me for, was now a weapon they'd planned to use against me." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by Leo's bed, listening to his soft breaths, thinking about all the versions of love that had betrayed me. And somewhere in that sleepless dark, I made another quiet promise to myself. If they wanted a fight, they'd get one. But this time, I wouldn't just survive. I'd win. I called Vivian first thing the next morning, forwarding her the screenshots David had sent. She arrived at my apartment less than an hour later, still in her coat, her expression grim but alive with focus. "This changes everything," she said, scanning through the messages. "This isn't just abandonment, it's conspiracy, identity fraud, and parental manipulation." Hearing it framed that way, parental manipulation brought a lump to my throat. Because at the heart of all of this was Leo, my sweet, gentle boy who still drew crayon pictures of our family with 3 smiling faces. They were trying to erase me from his life, piece by piece, story by story, like I was just a character in David's rewritten version of the truth. Vivian filed new motions immediately evidence preservation, injunctions against Beatrice for identity theft, an official complaint to the police. Her words were like armor wrapping around me, but beneath the legal language, I could still feel the pulse of something rawer, more human fear. That evening, as Leo slept beside his stuffed dinosaur, I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by files and copies, thinking about the woman I used to be, the one who edited other people's stories for a living. I used to believe in clean endings, in justice, in redemption. Now, I was living inside a story with none of those things in sight. The next day, Vivian called with an update. We've filed the fraud report. We've also added the text messages as evidence of intent. The judge is going to take this seriously. Her voice steadied me for the first time. The chaos started to feel like strategy. But that calm didn't last long. That afternoon, my phone rang again. A number I didn't recognize. International prefix. My pulse quickened as I answered. Mrs. Mitchell. The voice was low, hesitant. Trevor. David's old friend. Trevor, I asked cautiously. I've been following what's happening, he said, his words tumbling fast. I need to tell you something. David mentioned an account. Offshore. Cayman Islands, I think. Said his mom helped him set it up years ago for tax reasons. I didn't think much of it then. But now, my grip on the phone tightened. Do you know the bank? I think First Caribbean International. I can't be sure, but he used to brag that it was untouchable. Untouchable, that was David's favorite word. After hanging up, I felt a strange, simmering clarity settle over me. He had hidden everything, lied to everyone, built a fortress of deceit and thought I'd never find a way inside. But David had never understood something fundamental about me. I had built my life on uncovering what people tried to hide. It's what I did for a living. It's who I was. That night, after Leo was asleep, I sat down at our shared computer, the one David had used for years, the one he probably thought I'd never dare to open again. I stared at the login screen for a long moment before typing in a variation of the password he always used. Leo's birth date, our anniversary, the year we bought our condo. My hands trembled as I hit enter. The screen blinked once, then it opened. I scrolled through his cloud drive, my breath catching as folder after folder appeared. One was labeled Barcelona Project, another New Beginnings. But the one that stopped me cold was Custody Strategy. Inside, I found files, screenshots of bank transfers, emails between him and Beatrice discussing how to hide assets, even a document outlining how to build a narrative of emotional instability against me in court. My name appeared over and over again, surrounded by words like unfit, dependent, volatile. It was like reading an autopsy of my marriage. I forwarded everything to Vivian immediately, attaching screenshots, file paths, timestamps. Within an hour, she called me back. I could hear the tension and awe in her voice. Suzanne, this is it. This is the smoking gun. We can file for emergency orders to freeze those offshore accounts, both Cayman and any linked subsidiaries, and will request international enforcement. The following 48 hours blurred into movement filings, affidavits, notarized documents, court clerks, emails flying across time zones. I was running on coffee, adrenaline, and fury when the ruling came through. I cried silently at my kitchen table. Emergency motion granted, Cayman account frozen pending investigation. For the first time, I felt the scale tilt back in my favor. But David didn't go down quietly. His lawyer filed a countermotion, accusing me of illegal hacking, of violating privacy laws to obtain evidence. It was a desperate move, and Vivian dismantled it within hours. Still, I knew David was spiraling, and spiraling men are dangerous. The proof came the next day, when Jackie called me directly. Her voice was small, shaky, stripped of the confidence she'd once worn like perfume. "Suzanne," she began, "we need to talk." About what, I asked flatly. "David's falling apart. He's been drinking, yelling, talking about fixing things with you directly. He's booked a flight to Chicago." My heart dropped. "When?" "Tomorrow." "And Suzanne, I think he's planning something. He's angry like I've never seen before." I swallowed hard. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because this isn't what I signed up for," she said quietly. "He told me everything would be clean new life, new country, no baggage. But now he's hiding money from me, too. There's another account, in Liechtenstein. I only found out yesterday." Liechtenstein, my mind spun. "Do you have proof?" "I have screenshots," she said quickly, "but I want protection. If I give you everything, I want assurance I won't face charges for helping him." "I can't promise anything," I said carefully, "but I'll talk to my attorney." Jackie exhaled shakily. "Please do it fast, because when David finds out what I've done, he'll come after me too." When I hung up, my hands were trembling so badly I could barely dial Vivian's number. She listened in silence as I explained, then said, "We'll draft a formal immunity proposal. If she gives us verified evidence, we can protect her as a cooperating witness, and Suzanne call the police, right now, if David lands in Chicago. We need a restraining order waiting." We filed everything overnight. Jackie came through, sending scanned documents showing account balances, transaction dates, even wire transfers between David, Beatrice, and offshore institutions, over $200,000. By dawn, we had enough to request a restraining order and a warrant for asset seizure. The next morning, while most of Chicago was just waking up, David's plane touched down at O'Hare, and waiting for him was airport security with court orders in hand. He called me from the holding office, his voice raw and venomous. "What the hell is this? Suzanne, I came back to work things out." "With a one-way ticket and no return flight?" I asked, keeping my tone even. "The court hearing is at 9 tomorrow. David, you'll want to be on time." Ato. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, with a sound that was half laugh, half snarl, he hung up. The next morning, I walked into the courthouse, my palms damp but my head high. David looked smaller than I remembered, unkempt, unshaven, his arrogance dimmed by exhaustion. His lawyer fidgeted beside him, clearly aware they were losing. Vivian presented everything: the offshore accounts, the fraudulent emails, the custody strategy, the evidence of conspiracy. Jackie's sworn statement was the final blow. When Vivian read aloud Beatrice's words about using my postpartum depression against me, the courtroom fell silent. David's face went pale. The judge leaned forward, voice low and cold. "Mr. Mitchell, you systematically defrauded your wife, abandoned your child, and engaged in an organized attempt to obstruct this court. You've left me no choice." He listed the rulings one by one: asset seizure, passport confiscation, full custody to me, supervised visitation only for David, and referral to the district attorney for criminal investigation of both David and his mother. I barely breathed as each word fell like a gavel against years of deceit. David didn't look at me as they led him out. Maybe he couldn't. Or maybe he finally realized the truth, that I wasn't the fragile woman he thought he could leave behind. For the first time in months, I felt something that almost scared me: peace. In the weeks following that courtroom reckoning, my life felt like it was being rewritten, one quiet, deliberate page at a time. The kind of rewriting that isn't just legal or logistical, it's spiritual. Every morning, I woke up to a silence that used to terrify me, but now it hummed with a strange kind of freedom. Leo and I moved into a small condo overlooking a park. It wasn't grand, but it was ours, paid for with the assets Vivian and her team had recovered. There were no echoes of slammed doors, no shadow of David's voice booming from another room. Just the sound of my son laughing as he raced his toy cars along the windowsill, the soft rustle of leaves outside, and the steady rhythm of my own breathing, finally. Mine again. But the aftermath wasn't simple. There were hearings, depositions, statements, signatures. Each document was a reminder of what betrayal costs, how deeply it weaves itself into your bones before you even notice. Vivian called it reconstruction. I called it learning to live without fear. David's mother, Beatrice, fought back at first. She hired lawyers, denied everything, tried to charm the court with her pearls and practiced tears. But the evidence was too strong. When the forensic accountants traced the offshore transfers, her name appeared again and again. There was no hiding behind politeness now. The day the charges for identity fraud were officially filed, Vivian called me. "It's done." She said simply. I didn't cheer or cry. I just sat there at my kitchen table, staring out at the quiet street below, feeling the strangest mix of grief and justice. Beatrice had spent years trying to make me feel small, criticizing my parenting, my choices, my very existence, yet, in the end, she'd destroyed her own reputation trying to protect the illusion of her perfect son. Her downfall wasn't dramatic or cinematic. It was slow and suffocating, like a curtain closing on a performance that should have ended long ago. As for David, he wasn't the same man who had once charmed a room full of editors with his confidence. He was thinner, paler, unshaven, haunted. The judge had ordered his passport confiscated, his accounts frozen, his access to Leo restricted to supervised visits that he rarely even showed up for. He had become a ghost long before the court made it official. People often ask if revenge felt good. The truth is, it didn't feel good. It felt necessary. Justice isn't joy. It's balance restored. It's the quiet relief of standing in a storm that once drowned you and realizing you're still breathing. 6 months after his text, 6 months after good luck paying rent, Leo and I settled into our new rhythm. I returned to editing full-time, though not at Horizon Books. I found a smaller publishing house that valued empathy as much as efficiency. They let me work from home on most days. Understanding that motherhood wasn't a side project, it was my core. Leo started at a new preschool nearby. His teacher said he was shy at first, but bright and curious, always asking why about everything. One afternoon, as I watched him build a tower out of wooden blocks, he turned to me and asked, "Mommy, is Daddy ever coming back?" The question hit like a whisper against a bruise. I smiled softly and said, "I don't know, sweetheart. But we're going to be okay either way." And we were, because slowly, the pain that once consumed me began to transform into something else: clarity. The kind that comes only after you've lost everything you thought defined you. I began to see my reflection differently in the mirror, not as the betrayed wife or the frightened mother, but as a woman who had survived, a woman who had faced humiliation, manipulation, and fear and still managed to stand upright, breathing, fierce. Sometimes, late at night, I'd reread the text that started it all, moving to Spain with Jackie. Good luck paying rent. I no longer cried when I saw it. Instead, I whispered to the glowing screen, "Thank you." Because that message, cruel as it was, freed me. It stripped away every illusion, every fragile piece of comfort I mistook for love. It forced me to see the truth that the worst betrayal can sometimes be the beginning of your greatest becoming. Jackie kept her promise to cooperate. The immunity Vivian arranged shielded her legally, though not from the guilt she confessed in our final phone call. "I thought I was in love," she said softly, "but it turns out I was just useful to both of them." Her voice trembled. "You didn't deserve any of it, Suzanne. You fought for Leo like no one ever fought for me." I didn't know what to say. There was no victory in hearing her regret. It just sounded like another broken thing left behind in David's wake. But I did thank her, because her truth had saved us both in different ways. Over time, the bitterness softened. I stopped replaying old arguments in my mind, stopped wondering what I could have done differently. Because the truth is, I didn't cause David's betrayal. I simply trusted the wrong person too deeply. And that's not a crime. That's love misplaced. Perhaps, but real while it lasted. One evening, about a year later, I took Leo to the park. The sun was setting, painting the sky gold and soft rose. He ran ahead, chasing a kite another child had let go, laughing as it dipped and danced in the wind. I watched him free, unburdened, safe, and felt a peace I hadn't known in years. When he came running back, breathless and smiling, he held out the kite string to me. "Hold it, Mommy," he said. And as I took it, watching the kite soar higher, I realized what this whole journey had been about. It wasn't about revenge or proving anything to David or Beatrice. It was about this moment standing in the wind, holding on to something fragile yet soaring. That was the story I wanted to tell. Not the one about the man who left, but the woman who stayed, who rebuilt, who rose. Because sometimes, when life burns everything down, it's not the end. It's just clearing the ground for something stronger to grow. And that's what Leo and I did. We grew. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening, for feeling, for believing in stories that start in heartbreak but end in strength. If you've ever been betrayed, abandoned, or underestimated, I hope my story reminds you you are not defined by who broke you, but by how you choose to heal. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, real, raw, and deeply human. And tell me in the comments what part of my story reminded you of your own. Because maybe, by sharing our pain, we can all find a little light again.